Then what is data breach? Let's see data breach here. So the bill defines personal data breach to mean an unauthorized processing or accidental disclosure, use, alteration, or destruction of personal data that comprises its confidentiality, integrity, and availability. The CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, it comes from your ISO guidelines. So this is quite important, and it's good that they have taken international guidelines also into consideration. And the breach part covers a lot of things. And in the event of personal data breach, data fiduciary or data principal. Sorry, what? Is somebody's mic open? Does somebody wants to ask a question?
I think that's just a hot mic. You can continue. No worries.
Okay. In the event of personal data breach, the data fiduciary or the data principal must inform the Data Protection Board of India and the affected data principal in a manner prescribed by the government. The broad definition of the personal data breach would cover small instances of data breach for which notification to the government and the data principal seems quite onerous. So, see, the government will tell how they have to, in case of breach, how the data principal or the data fiduciary must reach out to the Data Protection Board, in how much time. Generally, under the GDPR, what we have seen is that if there is a data breach, you reach out to the Data Protection Authority and inform them about the breach. But if you also see that individuals' data is lost and there's no way of retrieving that data, or that data is gone, then you reach out to the individual and you also tell them that my data, your data has been lost, and these were the breach measures we took, but we couldn't protect this data. There was an attack, and you have to prove in that case that your security measures were good enough. Your cybersecurity measures to tackle all this was really good enough, but it couldn't work, or it couldn't handle the attack that happened, and you lost it. So also there's the time frame of 72 hours, but we'll have to see what is the time frame in this case for that matter. And there's something called business continuity principle, that after the breach has happened, how will the business continue? So I'm sure when the guidelines are there, the government will also provide that, when you archive the data, or how does the company continues with the business if all the data is lost. For example, we talked a lot about HR data. HR has all the information about like the payrolls and who are the suppliers, who are the customers, and if that is lost, how will the business run? So the business continuity principle relates to the data breach, because business continuity comes into play only when there is a breach of data. So that also needs to be highlighted here. Then data localization and data transfers. So the bill does not directly include provisions of data localization. So the requirement in the previous draft was that the critical personal data needs to be stored only in India, or that sensitive personal data can be transferred outside India, but a copy must be retained in India. And that has been removed in this bill. This bill states that the government would notify countries to which personal data can be transferred. So the government will give you a list. So basically, this is a way of finding, it is the government's initiative, and it's their obligation to tell which are the safer countries to transfer data, and which are the countries which the government doesn't see as safe countries to transfer data. So it is something similar to your adequate countries. So, but the government still has to notify that what will be the process of transferring data, to these countries, which the government has notified, and will this list keep changing? How a country will be selected as a good country where personal data can be transferred. So it would appear that until the government notifies these countries, personal data can be freely transferred outside India, like unless the government notifies, then this is the loophole. That's why I tell you that when we are reading these things, you can say, yes, the government will notify, but what before the government notifies? Before that, you're free to transfer data anywhere outside India through notifications or anything. So, and the law does not cover other means of allowing data transfers, such as through standard contractual clauses. So we also have to see the bill has to progress and develop on this part, that how will data transfers take place? If of all the countries in the world, the government has notified only 30 countries where the data can be transferred. Is there a means? Is there a contractual obligation that that needs to be stated in the document when data is being transferred? What about if a company has business in a country that's not notified by the government? How will data go there? So the government cannot really stop your data from going anywhere. There will be means and mechanisms. The government will not say that you cannot transfer data to this country. But the government might say that these are the measures you have to take and these are the assessments you have to do to ensure that you transfer data to this country. And also for the government to list 100 countries in the world and say that these countries are good to transfer data, the government will have to do a lot of research work behind it and a constant updation on how their law is developing, what is the thing in their law that has been taken down. So that is a lot of obligation on the government also, to constantly say that, because the GDPR has a very simple way of saying that once you have this something that's very closely related to GDPR, you approve that as an adequate country. Here, the government doesn't say that. How is it going to approve these so-called adequate countries? They've not called it adequate, by the way, in the bill. So these approved countries, what are the grounds for these countries to be the approved countries for transferring data? What about the countries which were not recognized by the government? How will data go there? So a lot of development in those cases is needed. Then exemption of the government. We've already read that the government has exemptions when it comes to state security, and the bill grants that power to the government and the government agencies also at the same time. So there's certain critiques of the bill.